Edinburgh, 1827. Gas lamps barely cut through the fog that November. In the narrow winds where buildings leaned so close their upper floors nearly touched, people lived stacked on top of each other, breathing the same stale air, passing around the same diseases. Dr. Robert Knox stood in his anatomy theatre before 70 medical students. Candles flickered across the dissection table. Knox was Edinburgh's star anatomist, sharp features, arrogant confidence. He lectured 3 times daily, and students bribed their way onto his waiting lists. But Knox had a serious problem. Bodies. He needed fresh ones. The human body doesn't wait for science. It starts rotting within hours of death. Medical students can't learn anatomy from textbooks alone. They need to see muscle connect to bone, need to understand how organs actually fit together, need to cut into real flesh. British law in 1827 allowed exactly one legal source for cadavers: executed criminals. That's it. No donated bodies, no consent forms, just hanged murderers. Edinburgh executed maybe 2 people per year. Knox needed 500 bodies annually just to keep his school running. The math was impossible, so anatomists bought from resurrection men, grave robbers who dug up fresh corpses and sold them for cash. Illegal but tolerated. Police looked away. Doctors paid quietly, asked nothing. £7, 10 shillings per body in summer when things rotted faster, £10 in winter. William Burke showed up in Edinburgh that same year, Irish. 40 years old, give or take, medium height, dark hair. Nothing about him screamed killer. He'd worked on the Union Canal hauling stone. When that dried up, he drifted into the city and moved in with a woman named Helen McDougall. They rented a room in William Hare's boarding house. Hare was Irish too, former canal worker, stocky build, quick temper. He ran the lodging house with his common-law wife, Margaret Laird. The place was a dump, cramped rooms, thin walls, the kind of establishment where nobody asked questions long as you paid your shilling. November 1827. An old army pensioner named Donald died in one of Hare's rooms. Heart probably gave out. Natural causes. But the man owed £4 in back rent. Hare bitched to Burke about it. £4. Just gone. Burke had an idea. That night they broke into the room where Donald's body waited for burial, pried open the cheap coffin, lifted out the corpse, carried it through dark streets to Dr. Knox's dissection rooms on Surgeons Square. A young assistant answered their knock, inspected the body under lamplight, fresh, intact, no questions. He paid them £7, 10 shillings, nearly double what the dead man owed. Burke and Hare walked back through Edinburgh with more money than either had seen in months. The assistant's name never made it into trial records, but his face stayed with them. How easy the whole thing was, how fast, how he never asked where the body came from. Just, is it fresh? They split the money, bought drinks, laughed about their luck. Something shifted in that moment, though. They'd discovered a human body was worth more dead than alive, at least to them. A labourer might make 10 shillings in a week. A body brought £7.10 in one night. Donald died on his own. But what if someone else died? Someone nobody would miss. December 1827 hit brutally cold. An English peddler named Joseph stumbled into Hare's lodging house, sick, burning with fever, paid for a bed and collapsed. Burke and Hare watched him suffer for 2 days. Then they decided. They brought Joseph whiskey, lots of it. Got him drunk until he could barely sit upright. Then Burke pressed a pillow over his face while Hare pinned down his arms. Took minutes, maybe less. Joseph was too weak to fight much. They stripped the body, hid it under a bed until dark, carried it to Knox's rooms, same as they'd done with Donald, same assistant, same quick inspection, same payment, £10 this time. Nobody asked how a seemingly healthy man ended up dead. Knox's assistant checked for freshness and damage, not cause of death. Burke and Hare's method left 0 marks, no strangulation bruises, no visible trauma. Just a body that looked like fever or drink got him. The money came fast. Questions never came at all. They'd crossed a line and discovered nobody was guarding it. February 1828. An old woman named Abigail Simpson showed up at the lodging house. Street peddler. Sold salt and matches from a basket. Lived alone. No family anyone knew of in Edinburgh. Burke invited her inside, offered breakfast, got her talking. She mentioned receiving her pension money, 18 shillings, a fortune for someone living rough. She never left that building. Burke and Hare used the same method. Whiskey first, then suffocation, fast, quiet. The boarding house had thin walls, but their technique made no noise, no screaming, no struggle that banged against floors. They delivered her body that night. Knox's people paid without hesitation. The pattern locked in. Burke and Hare found something rare, a crime with immediate profit and apparently zero risk. Nobody looked for these victims. Nobody reported them missing. They were transients, drifters, people the city forgot before they even disappeared. And Dr. Knox needed bodies. He never asked origins, maybe assumed they were grave robbed like everyone else's supply. Maybe he knew and didn't care. Trial records never proved direct knowledge, but Knox was brilliant. He would have noticed these bodies were different, fresher than exhumed corpses. Still warm sometimes, no grave dirt under fingernails. Fresh bodies made better teaching tools, though. His students learned more, his reputation grew, so money kept flowing. Between February and October 1828, Burke and Hare murdered at least 13 more people, maybe 16 total. Exact count never got confirmed because some victims were never identified. They targeted people society already discarded. An old woman named Mary Haldane, a sex worker named Mary Patterson, young, beautiful, killed in her prime, a grandmother and her blind grandson murdered together, an 18-year-old named Daft Jamie who had intellectual disabilities and was known throughout Edinburgh. That last one was their mistake. Daft Jamie knew everyone, wandered Edinburgh doing odd jobs, telling stories, making people laugh, 6 feet tall, gentle, instantly recognizable wherever he went. When Burke and Hare delivered his body to Knox's dissection rooms in October 1828, several students recognized him immediately. They stood around the table staring. One asked Knox directly where this came from. Knox gave some vague answer about anatomical suppliers and started cutting quickly. He removed Jamie's feet first. The most distinctive part, since Jamie had a unique walk, everyone knew. Allegedly told assistants to dispose of them separately. Students whispered. Some felt uncomfortable. None reported it to authorities. Knox was too important, too respected, and everyone knew anatomy schools bought from grave robbers anyway. Maybe this was just unusually fresh. But Burke and Hare got sloppy, confident, drinking more, spending money visibly. Helen McDougall wore new clothes. The four of them, Burke, Helen, Hare and Margaret, formed a tight unit, shared profits, kept the secret. October 31st, 1828. Halloween night, though nobody in Edinburgh called it that yet. An Irish woman named Mary Docherty arrived in town, looking for relatives, heard the name Docherty mentioned around Hare's lodging house, and stopped by hoping to find family. Burke saw opportunity, told her his mother's maiden name was Docherty, invited her to drink, brought her back to the boarding house where he and Helen stayed. A single room in the home of a couple named Gray. The Grays were hosting Burke and Helen as lodgers. That night, Burke convinced them to sleep elsewhere. Said Mary Docherty was distant family and they needed privacy for family business. The Grays agreed and left. Big mistake. Burke, Helen, Hare and Margaret got Mary Docherty drunk. Walls were thin. Anne Gray heard laughing, singing, then quiet. Next morning, November 1st, Anne Gray returned home. Noticed Burke acting strange, nervous, kept blocking her from entering the room where Mary slept. Anne's husband James came home around midday. Burke pulled him aside, warned him not to let Anne into that room, said there was a woman's body hidden under the straw mattress. James stared at him. Burke explained quickly, said Mary died of natural causes, heart failure, too much drink. He and Hare would dispose of the body tonight, but if Anne found it first, she'd panic and call police and everyone would have problems. James nodded slowly, told his wife to stay away from the room. Anne didn't listen. That evening, while Burke and the others were out, Anne went into the room, lifted the straw mattress. Mary Docherty's body lay underneath, still warm, bruises around the mouth and nose. Anne ran to her husband. They argued in frantic whispers, finally decided they had to report it. But if they went to police immediately, Burke and Hare might realize and flee. So they waited until the four returned. Around 7 p.m., Burke, Helen, Hare and Margaret came back, drunk, loud. Burke went straight to the room, checked under the mattress, and froze. Body was gone. He spun around, accused Anne Gray of stealing it. Actually said that. "Where's the body?" Anne backed away. James stepped between them. Burke realized his mistake, tried to recover, offered them £10 a week for silence, then 20, voice getting desperate. The Greys ran, went straight to the police station on High Street. Burst through the door around 8 p.m, told the officer on duty there was a murdered woman in their lodging house and the killers were still there. Within an hour, police surrounded the building, arrested Burke, Helen, Hare and Margaret, searched the premises. No body. Burke and Hare moved fast. Moment the Greys ran, they'd bundled Mary Docherty's corpse into a tea chest and hauled it to Knox's dissection rooms. Knox's assistant accepted delivery around 8:30 p.m. Police went to Knox's building next, knocked on the cellar door. Porter answered. Officers pushed past him, searched the anatomy rooms, found Mary Docherty's body on a table, naked, already partially dissected. Knox started work within an hour of receiving her. Officers arrested Knox immediately, seized his records, started questioning assistants. Investigation exploded. Suddenly authorities asked questions nobody asked before. How many bodies had Burke and Hare delivered? Where did they all come from? How long was this happening? Knox's records showed 16 bodies delivered by Burke and Hare over 10 months, but records were incomplete. Some deliveries weren't logged, some bodies never identified. Police interviewed people throughout Edinburgh. Slowly, names emerged. Mary Patterson disappeared in April. Her body recognized by friends who saw it on Knox's table but never reported it. Daft Jamie. Everyone remembered him, but nobody connected his disappearance to anatomists. Abigail Simpson, Joseph the peddler, an old woman named Effie, a sex worker named Anne. List grew. Burke, Helen, Hare, Margaret held in separate cells. Police interrogated them individually. Nobody talked. They kept the secret for months, weren't breaking now. Then prosecutors made an offer. November 15, 1828. Crown offered Hare and Margaret immunity from prosecution in exchange for testimony against Burke and Helen. Hare took it. Immediately, Margaret followed. They gave full confessions, named victims, described methods, explained profit splits, detailed every delivery to Knox's rooms. Burke and Helen were charged with 3 counts: Mary Docherty, Mary Patterson, Daft Jamie. Only cases with enough physical evidence and witness testimony to prosecute. Trial began December 24, 1828. Christmas Eve. Edinburgh's High Court packed before dawn on Christmas Eve. People lined up for hours just to get inside. Outside, crowds filled the streets. This wasn't just murder. This was something darker. Human bodies turned into products. Poor people killed and sold like cattle. And doctors, educated men, pillars of society, created the market that made it profitable. Burke sat in the dock looking smaller than expected. Reporters called him ordinary, unremarkable. That terrified people more. He didn't look like a monster, looked like anyone. Helen McDougal sat beside him, claimed she knew nothing, that Burke and Hare kept murders secret from her and Margaret. Technically possible. Killings happened in different rooms. Late at night, while the women drank or slept, Crown Prosecutor Sir William Ray opened by addressing the impossibility of prosecuting all 16 suspected murders. Too many unidentified victims, too much time passed. But 3 cases had enough evidence. Then he called William Hare. Hare took the stand around 10 a.m. Courtroom went silent. He testified for hours, described each murder in flat clinical detail, zero emotion, just facts. Burke usually held the pillow, he said. Hare held arms and legs. Sometimes they switched, took 3 to 5 minutes on average, less if the victim was old or sick. Always got victims drunk first, easier, quieter, never used weapons, nothing that left marks. Knox's people examined bodies carefully. Any sign of violence and they'd refuse payment. So suffocation, clean, simple, profitable. Defense attorneys attacked Hare's testimony, pointed out his immunity deal, suggested he was lying to save himself. But his details matched physical evidence, matched witness statements, matched timelines. Jury believed him. Mary Patterson's case hit hardest. She was a young sex worker, 18 years old, known around Edinburgh's streets. April 1828, she was drinking with friends when Burke approached. Charming, bought drinks, invited her back to his room. She left with him around midnight, never returned. Friends reported her missing. Police did nothing. Sex workers disappeared regularly. Nobody investigated. 3 days later, students in Knox's theatre noticed the body on the table. Beautiful, unusual. Several recognized her. One sketched her face before Knox started cutting. At trial, those students testified, described the body, confirmed it was Mary Patterson. One showed his sketch. Courtroom gasped. Defense argued she might have died naturally. Drink, disease. Maybe Burke found her dead and just sold the body. Hare's testimony crushed that. Described Burke suffocating her, carrying her through streets. Knox's assistant paying £8. Daft Jamie's murder was worse, though. He was intellectually disabled but harmless. Everyone knew him, did small jobs, told jokes, made children laugh, trusted everyone completely. October 1828, Burke lured him to Hare's place with promise of food. Jamie followed willingly, always hungry. They fed him, got him drunk. Burke held the pillow while Hare held Jamie's arms. Jamie was strong, fought harder than others. Took nearly 10 minutes. His body showed more struggle. Knox's students noticed that too. Defense tried arguing reasonable doubt. Said Hare was a liar saving himself. Said Crown couldn't prove Burke did the actual killing. Prosecutor dismantled it methodically, showed pattern, showed motive, showed Burke and Hare worked together on every murder. Jury deliberated 50 minutes. Found Burke guilty on all counts. Found Helen not guilty. Insufficient evidence she participated directly. Judge sentenced Burke to death by hanging. Body to be publicly dissected afterward. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Burke would end up on the same dissection tables where he'd sold his victims. January 28, 1829. Execution Day. Over 25,000 people packed into the square outside Liberton's Wynd. Largest crowd in Edinburgh's history. They started gathering before sunrise, pushing, shoving, climbing walls and rooftops for better views. Burke was led to the scaffold around 8 a.m. He looked terrified. Tried to speak, but the crowd roared so loud nobody heard him. The hangman placed the noose. Burke's legs shook. The trap dropped at 8:15. Burke's body jerked, thrashed. The drop wasn't calculated right. His neck didn't break clean. He strangled slowly. Took several minutes. The crowd cheered the entire time. After 40 minutes, they cut him down, loaded the body onto a cart, took it directly to the Edinburgh Medical College for public dissection. Dr. Alexander Munro performed the autopsy in a packed lecture hall. Over 30,000 people tried to get tickets. Most were turned away. Those who got inside watched Monroe cut into Burke's chest, remove his organs, explain anatomy using the killer's own body. Afterward, they displayed Burke's skeleton in the college's museum. It's still there today. His death mask hangs beside it, and a pocketbook made from his tanned skin sits in a glass case. The museum used to let visitors touch it. William Hare walked free. Immunity deal protected him, but Edinburgh wanted blood. Mobs hunted him for weeks. He fled the city in February 1829, supposedly went to London, disappeared completely. Nobody knows what happened to him. Some say he ended up blind and homeless. Others claim he died in a lime pit. No records exist. Margaret Laird vanished too. Left Scotland entirely, never heard from again. Helen MacDougall tried staying in Edinburgh. Couldn't. People recognized her everywhere, threw stones, threatened violence. She fled to Australia eventually, died there in the 1850s. Dr. Robert Knox faced no criminal charges, insufficient evidence of direct knowledge. But his career ended anyway. Students boycotted his lectures. Medical societies expelled him. He left Edinburgh in 1830, moved to London, worked in obscurity, died poor in 1862. The Burke and Hare case changed British law forever. Parliament passed the Anatomy Act in 1832. It allowed unclaimed bodies from hospitals and workhouses to be used for medical education. Legal supply increased dramatically. Grave robbing and murder for anatomy became unnecessary. But the case left deeper marks. It exposed how Victorian society valued certain lives over others. Poor people, immigrants, sex workers, the disabled, people Edinburgh considered disposable. Burke and Hare didn't invent that system. They just exploited it with brutal efficiency. 16 people minimum, maybe more, killed for profit, reduced to products. Their names mostly forgotten until the trial forced Edinburgh to remember. The city never really recovered from that. Still carries the stain. Burke's skeleton in the museum, tours of the murder sites, the story retold endlessly, because it asks an uncomfortable question that never goes away. How many more Burke and Hares exist when society decides some people don't matter?